I recorded a first look at this, but my video sucked. So I'm recording now an actual small review, but this is a surface review at best. I gave this a read over yesterday. This is Gradient Descent for Mothership. So Mothership, if you're not aware, has been out in what is essentially, this player survival guide is sort of a, in video game terms, I guess, it would be like an open beta test. So they've been selling it, and I think taking feedback and everything, and they just did a Kickstarter to put out the actual first edition box set of Mothership. Very successful Kickstarter. I don't know. I did not back it. I've kind of given up on Kickstarter. But Mothership is an interesting game. It is sci-fi horror, and that's really its intent. And what kind of horror you play is really kind of up to you. It can be an alien type horror, or it could be a more supernatural horror like Event Horizon or something like that. What I really liked about Mothership when I read it was that it has a lot of toolkits, a lot of like random charts and bits of information, these 100 patches, 100 trinkets, things like hiring mercenaries and how that goes, panic tests. There's a lot of different stuff, and it crams a ton of stuff onto every page. There's a player's cheat sheet here on the back. The character sheets are in here. So it has a lot of really good information, very gameable information. And the supplements are the same. Dead Planet, which deals with a colony, and it has a lot of stuff where if you were going to do a colony, it has toolkits for building that colony and for various elements of it. Again, the focus is horror, but what kind of horror and how deep the horror goes is really up to you. And then Pound of Flesh has a space station. It has sort of information for how you might build elements of your own space station, and it has a lot of cyber implant and cyber-related material. There's cybernetic mutations on the back, a random search chart on the back. So again, every bit of these books is crammed with information. When I bought Mothership and read it, sort of hit me at the perfect time. It was early in the pandemic, and I was thinking about doing some solo RPGing. And I'm a sci-fi buff. I wanted to do sci-fi. So I started reading it, and I thought that this was a really interesting game. And it really got my creative juices flowing, and I was very excited about it. As time went on, and I did try some solo RPGing, I definitely drew from this, but I didn't really get too deep into it. But I did go back and reread it. And on my reread, I was less enamored of the game mechanics, the core system of it, than I had been on my first pass. On my first pass, it really reminded me a lot of what I like about basic role-playing. On my second pass, it kind of reminded me of some of the things I don't like about basic role-playing. I really like basic role-playing. It's probably my second favorite system. Put out my favorite game called Cthulhu. I like basic role-playing, but it does have some drawbacks, and I kind of felt like maybe Mothership dove too far into the drawbacks and not as much into the benefits. I could be wrong. I have not yet run or played Mothership, so I don't know. I'm sort of speaking just from reading it, and RPGs they can be entertaining reads, they can be interesting reads, but you don't really know until you play. You really don't know until you're on the table doing the game. So, anyway, my friendly local game store that I wish was slightly more local so I could get there more often. My wife picked up Gradient Descent for me. This is the third supplement, the fourth book for Mothership, and this is that's official. There's apparently a lot of third-party Mothership stuff out there, which I enjoy a lot about the contemporary RPG scene, that there's so much DIY, so much third-party stuff out there that companies are a little less litigious than they used to be, and they're making that, because that is how you grow a game. You grow a game by not messing with your fan base, and your fans are going to make tons of awesome material, and it will keep driving them back to the original material. It's just common sense. Anyway, Gradient Descent is a mega dungeon. So, using the term from more traditional fantasy role-playing games, a mega dungeon is, you had Dungeons and Dragons where you were delving into old crypts and underground kingdoms or whatever. A mega dungeon was one of those that just went on for way longer. If a standard dungeon delve was into a 5 or 6 room cave system or crypt or whatever, where you were going to kill a big monster at the end, a mega dungeon might be 5 or 6 levels, each level with 30 or 40 rooms, and there's factions and they're all battling, and it's, all that kind of thing. Well, this is like a mega dungeon, but for sci-fi horror of Mothership. Like a lot of their books before, there's a lot of toolkits in here, a lot of charts, a lot of things that will help you and that you could translate into other stuff. I love this D100 artifacts table, and it has some crazy stuff like complete this is really simple. Complete astronomical database for a previously undiscovered system. Okay, handy. But I also like that there's things like pair of eyes. When installed, offer the best eyesight, clarity, zoom, thermal, etc. For each month installed, make a sanity save or lose 1d10 sanity as you succumb to every little detail. So I like that. It's kind of like, again, for a fantasy thing, it would be like a little magic item, but a magic item that comes with a little negative, a little curse under there. So there's a lot of those toolkits in here, and that's great. The Mega Dungeon itself, it has a key for how to read this. I did not find reading the map as intuitive as I had hoped, and I do feel like generally they've designed things to be fairly intuitive, so I was a little bummed that I didn't find it as intuitive as I had hoped, but I do think that maybe once I actually started working with it, it would make more sense, because when I did sit down and try to actually think about how characters would move from one place to another, the map started making a little bit more sense, but it's not as intuitive as I would like, and I don't know what the fix on that is, because the map is very abstracted. So you'll see, this is a piece of the map, and these rooms, there's codes on them. The color that they're, the color that they are, the way that the passages go between them, the links to the passages, the specifics of all of these make a difference. Even the fact, these are green means they're not on this page. Okay. So there's a lot coded into these, which is sort of interesting, but also means you've got to get your head into that game about where these things are and what that means and where to find them. Again, I think once you start using it, it will probably make more sense. What I really like about this, excuse me, I like the basic concept. It's not necessarily new. I think at least one, if not two, of William Gibson's Sprawl trilogy kind of deal with a similar idea. And, Blade Runner and all this sort of thing. But it's got a cool concept. It has a cool location. I really like that you are essentially you're in a big space station, but it's kind of like, imagine being in the Nostromo and the mining facility that the Nostromo is hauling in the first Alien film. And, you're going first in the Nostromo, it's all normal human-sized rooms. Everything's built for people to walk around, but you get into that mining facility, and all of a sudden you're talking about these grand open areas with massive amounts of equipment, where poor Harry Dean Stanton gets munched, all that kind of thing. But imagine that, but without gravity, without light, because it's not made for people in a lot of this place. Or if it was made for people, they're not living in it now because of what's gone on. So it's a big, giant area that's mostly without gravity, mostly without light that you don't provide. The places that do have gravity and do have light, well, there's reasons for that. And you've got to try to get around in this huge complex, and there are factions. There are multiple factions. There's one, in an odd twist for Mothership, there's one faction or figure who is a power player who seems genuinely good, like has a what I think is close to objectively good motivations as you can have, which is a nice refreshing change. So there's a lot to it, and I do think that this could be really interesting to play. Chances are I'm going to raid this material for other games, and raiding Mothership is pretty much what I'm really looking at doing at this point, because after getting Mothership and reading through a bunch of these books and enjoying them, but also kind of bouncing a little bit off of the mechanics, I ended up getting Alien, and I ended up playing Alien. And what I realized is that Alien does for me what Mothership almost did, what Mothership really made me want. Because one of the things that I found fascinating with Mothership is the ability to dial up and down the horror and the style of horror. Again, supernatural could be like Dead Space, or it could be, really more human level. I say human level because it could be an alien running around. It could be more a scientific horror versus a supernatural horror. But as I was reading it, what I got to thinking about is all of the elements of horror could be toned down and just dealt with the horror and the stress of living in space in a more realistic setting. And that got me thinking about movies like Outland or TV shows like The Expanse, and I know novel series like The Expanse. And it got me thinking about 2300 AD, which is a setting that I have always found really fascinating from GDW, but the game mechanics on this, as far as I can tell, having read through them, they are unplayable. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I guess people have played it in the past, but it's such a great setting and such a clunky mess of a game mechanic. And very much of its time, very 80s, too much simulationist, too much wargaming, not enough proofreading and play testing. I don't know. So 2300 is a great setting, kind of a near future, a little bit, I don't want to say gritty because I don't mean that in a noir or a Pulp Fiction-y kind of way. I mean gritty in like Alien or like Outland or like The Expanse. It's a lived-in, somewhat clunky, people just doing what they can to get by, excuse me, kind of a setting. And I think that and Alien and Mothership, I think there are pieces of these that can all go together. So my idea is at some point I want to run 2300 using Alien, but raiding Mothership and things like Gradient Descent to use for material, because I love what Alien does with stress mechanics. And I think it's smoother. I just think it's smoother because the Year Zero engine I think is so smooth. I think it's smoother than how it works in Mothership, which is a little more like Sanity in Call of Cthulhu. And that can be a little clunky. Sorry, I love Call of Cthulhu, but it can be a little clunky. So anyway, that's my thought. Alien to run this using toolkits from this. Maybe I'll have a different opinion of this if I ever get a chance to play, and I could have a very different opinion of it if the first edition, the actual box set, comes out and I'm able to check that out, and perhaps feedback they got from these earlier editions went into that. I don't know what the circumstances around that are. So we'll see. Anyhow, that's my little look at Gradient Descent. I think absolutely it's worth picking up, even with my mixed feelings on the end result of Mothership. I highly recommend checking this game out. I think that this has a lot of really good stuff to have in your arsenal as a game master of any kind of science fiction game. They're not super expensive. Get them at your local game store, order them direct from the site. That's Tuesday Night Games site, and that's Night, K-N-I-G-H-T. Hopefully you can get them from your local game store. I'm lucky enough to have a game store nearby that will actually carry stuff other than Dungeons & Dragons and Pathfinder. Sadly, it is the most distant of the three that I do have in my area, but at least it exists and it's not so far away that I can't get to it if I absolutely need to. Anyhow, that's what I've got today, so take care.